continue to rule the world. Uzi goes godlike.
This is what peak League of Legends looks like.
Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and everybody else. Happy Mother's Day to everyone that celebrates today. And we will lock in our very first two teams moving on to the next stage of competition here in Reykjavik, Iceland. Group A will be taking to the stage, starting with RNG, who remain undefeated at 4-0, taking on the Unicorns of Love. The broadcast will be bringing you all of the action here from Berlin, as you are, well, maybe warming up the mechanics. I'm not quite sure what was happening there. I'm Quickshot, of course. I will be hosting the analyst today with Ender here in Berlin, as you get some scenic shots of the studio. And I do have the great honor of introducing Clement as our regional LPL broadcast master. Clement, did you expect RNG to be as dominant as they have played so far?
Honestly, yes. I don't think it comes as a surprise that RNG are so strong, and I'm just glad to be here at MSI breaking it out with both of you here.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be crazy not to think that RNG would come out swinging here. So everything going to expectations in this group so far.
The question I'm going to ask you later today is, whose funeral are you dressed for, Ender? Because our first round robin is now in the books. It's time to take a look at the standings. Yesterday, Cloud9 nabbed their very first win. Mad Lions managed to close out a victory in a very, very back and forth game against Pain. I lost my mind. I almost lost my voice. And it was very back and forth in the game, Ender.
The game was just complete insanity, and throughout it all, it felt like Mad Lions were always in the advantage state, right? Like, they were winning the majority of the 5v5s. Pain had a couple of good punches, but it ultimately came down to their side lane pressure. Robo, who at one point was 1-6 in that game, was still able to find a way to have an influence, break up in the base, and with just 1 or 2 extra seconds, it's Pain walking away with the win, and it's a very different group.
It didn't feel like Mad Lions had an answer for Robo's side lane pressure. Now, Clement, what did you make of the game as you were watching?
Well, I think this is a triumph for tenacity. Pain Gaming really nearly took away the game, and I have to say that we have to keep our eyes on Athelio. So far, 2-0 in the tournament. Great game coming out from Mad Lions, especially the AD carry.
Yeah, I think when I look at Pain, 2 of the games that they have played, they have been able to dig deep, come back despite being in deficits. And I wonder what influence that will have when they get to the second round robin later in the week.
Yeah, and I think it goes for that entire group in a way. Even Mad Lions with a 3-0 record have had 2 very, very close games. Then you have PSG right behind them, and that looked like almost their easiest game of the tournament so far. So I still think that out of all the groups, that has the one for like the majority of like upsets to happen potentially and the most mix-up in the next round robin.
Yeah, I just heard you say PSG looked like the easiest one, and I'm going to say...
For Mad Lions.
Yeah. First day on the job. First day on the job. Give the man some time. I think PSG has some surprises for you, because they're also my horse, too.
It was very funny. As soon as Ender mentioned PSG talent, I saw Clement like chomping at the bit to get in there. We'll see if they'll be the second team to advance to the Rumble stage. And of course, teams like Pain Gaming, they bring up our excellent MasterCard question of the day. This was raised by Twitter user at Raptira, or Raptor that's crying, which is, are there any regions you see as up and coming from the minor regions, ones that could make a big splash in the next couple of years? Clement, I'm going to go to you first because you already have some hopes on, PSG talent. So who else are you looking at?
I think when we think about sports, it's all about individual heroics, but I think region overall strength is really scientific. It's 2 things. It's player base and it's your access to good servers. And for that reason, I think VCS is going to be the next up-and-coming big region. They have a great player base. They can play on the Korean servers. And if you want a general check on how well your region is doing, just look at your non-imports and how old they are. For instance, RNG, their oldest person is 22 years old, and they have no imports. So that's where you want to be.
Imports, oldest, Pain Gaming. Interesting. Let's turn our attention to another region that hits at least one of those things you were talking about. The Japanese server, the LFL. Detonation Focus Me fell just short of defeating Damwon. I wanted that win to happen so badly, and that final dive under the inhibitor just didn't work out, Ender.
Oh, it was such a good attempt from this team. And I think you would say that 95% of the teams in this tournament would be thrilled to even get this close to beating Damwon Gaming. And ultimately, they came in with a great game plan. They really attacked around the top lane. Within fights, they were looking very, very strong. It was just a few stumbles and overreaches in the team fights where they ultimately fell short at the end.
Clement, what did you think of this performance from Detonation Focus Me?
I really think it showed that, gods can bleed as well. DK, a lot of people had said this is the go-to champion that's just going to stomp through MSI, but their early laning phase can be exploited, and we have seen this sort of shift in opinion. C9 and PSG, we heard from their post-game interviews, they now view RNG as the team to beat at MSI.
I wonder how much this will change when we advance to the next stage, because obviously the quality of your competition does have a very large impact on how the team looks. And I think, was it Canyon that said after the interview yesterday that all credit to DFM? It was because of their mistakes that allowed Damwon to win, not the other way around. It wasn't a foregone conclusion. Anyways, talking about DFM, Laure caught up with their support, Kazu, to get his thoughts after the team's extremely valiant performance.
Okay. Kazu, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. I'm so sorry it didn't work out the way you wanted to today, but you almost beat the favorites of the tournament. So I want to know more. How did you prep against Damwon, and what did you identify as the weaknesses to beat them today?
ダウンが昨年の世界王者ってことは分かってたし、でも自分たちのその超攻撃的なスタイルは世界に通用するっていう自信があったので、それを今回もぶつけてみました。
So we knew Damwon is the world champion, and they're really good. So, but in the same time, we believe strongly that DFM's aggressive style can compete against the top level. So we prepared enough, and then we gave everything.
You almost beat the world champion just now, and you actually beat the first seed from NA yesterday. So what do you think it tells about the level from Destination Focus Me at MSI this year?
自分たちのこの MSI の中でのレベルはまだ正直わからないんですけど、正直前半戦は自分たちが日本という国がマイナーリージョンの中で弱い地域だというその相手のチームの傲慢さもあったと思いますし、その後半戦でしっかりと相手が対策してきた中で自分たちがどれぐらいできるのかは正直まだ分かりません。ただ自分たちのプレースタイル、自分たちの LOL をしっかりと貫けばいい結果につながると信じてます。
So we honestly don't know where our level is within this MSI, but in the same time, it's true that many of the teams kind of look down on us because we're the minor region. So real challenge starts on the second round when they really actually try to analyze more about our gameplay. But also I believe that if we play our game, we should have a good chance.
Thank you so much for that interview, Lauren. Refreshingly frank from Kazu, talking about they don't really know where their level is, understanding and recognizing that maybe the opponents may not have taken them as seriously, but they will have a shot at revenge, and maybe Detonation Focus Me can continue to impress. They weren't the only ones causing a commotion on stage yesterday because, of course, the LPL's RNG put up quite a show of their own. They are just smashing. I think the words I used were obliterate, decimate, dominate, I can't even remember the fourth one, actually. So, Clement, how is it that RNG are this good?
Well, obviously, I think they're playing with a lot of tools that really suit their playstyle. They have always been a team that relishes flex picking, and they're always a heavy roam support team. So against lane opponents that really can't hold them in place, they are going to dominate. They are going to smash through you. It is part stylistic. It is part just the overall player level. And I have some stats for you here to back that up. They're on average 66,000 gold ahead at 15 minutes. They have finished all 4 of their games combined in under 100 minutes, and so far they have only lost 2 towers in this tournament. Nothing has been scratching RNG so far.
Oh
It's just domination. And can I say, I am just so happy that we got to see Xiaohu in the mid lane as well, you know, showing off that he can be the best top laner, jungler, mid laner on his team too.
Best bot laner. He played Lucian as well.
He was just in bot lane the whole time too. And it was really fun to see RNG just take on a completely different style with him not playing the top lane, coming into mid and just activating all around the map.
I do think it is important to address and to call out that yes, RNG are obviously a very strong team and expected to be better than opponents, but I've been a little bit disappointed by Unicorns of Love. I think initially their first draft that we've seen left a lot to be desired. I think the same can be true for Pentanet, but also then in execution, in how they're playing out their comps, how they're playing out the laning phase, it has allowed RNG obviously to be very good, their opponents to not live up, and that is obviously showing that very large gap.
Right, like we saw, like to speak to the draft point, right? We have like the lower priority on Rumble, them leaving it open, thinking that, oh, with this Nidalee counter pick, we can shut it down or clear faster than it. That just didn't really pan out. And then I would also just say, like, across the board, you get shaken when you play against RNG because of how quickly they can move around the map, because of just their raw individual skill too. Like 1 second you're in lane, the next second there's Ming there, there's Wei there, there's a Rumble that's flashing over walls in your jungle. Like what can you do against that? It's difficult.
Just before we dive into some of the priority picks that have kind of shaped the first few days, Clement, what was your expectation of the Unicorns of Love sort of strength and how you thought they could have matched up to RNG? I would not have said I would have expected them to win, but I thought they would have put up a little bit more of a fight than what I've seen in the first 2 games.
I had Unicorns of Love as the second best in the group. I think that they have a lot of international experience. They play on the US server, so this should be a very close peer competitor. But unfortunately, I think they are not playing in the meta that suits them. They are a top lane that generally is a weak side top laner, and they try to play through mid lane a lot. And I think the meta is just completely at odds where Unicorns of Love actually want to be, and that's hindering them.
Interesting. Well, we've got a lot of games of your well to explore that thoughts a little later today. And now I want to focus in on some of these priority picks, 3 of which have been extremely heavily discussed, both pre-tournament and during the course of the last 4 days. It's going to be Morgana, Lee Sin, and Rumble. I want to start with Morgana. Let's talk a little bit about how flexible the pick is, why it's so prevalent, and what we've seen from teams utilizing it.
Well, I think with Morgana, we've seen like the Buster clear speed, of course, and the way she can just blitz through the jungle, do multiple camps at the same time because of her puddle and the way it ticks down its cooldown when you're hitting jungle camps as well. And then on top of that, you have the fast clear, you have an AP threat too, so it opens up some diversity in the solo lane champions you can play too with some more AD elements. She's also got great moves too.
I'm as distracted with the dodge.
I'm so distracted.
We actually didn't see that video a little earlier today. So let's go back. Some reasons. Fast clear speed, flexible, played in different roles, unconventional ones. And now we can see, obviously, keystones and items.
I also wanted to point out the keystone of the Predator choice on her because, of course, her binding, very powerful, but it's not usually your first max. Usually you're going to go down the Tormented Soil route. So you need like laners that can set up for really hard CC. But once you hit level 6 and you have your ultimate that's point and click, and you have Predator, which gets you in range for that point and click, there is very little counterplay for that champion because it's not even like you can like stop her from running at you by CCing her. She's got a black shield. It's easy.
Technically speaking, you don't even have to point and click your ultimate. Just stand close
you just
and
have to
click.
Actually.
Clement, so build up a little bit on the Morgana as well as Lee Sin, which is the champion that you had your eyes on in the solo laners.
Lee Sin has to be my favorite in the meta right now. He's naturally just a very flashy champion, and the way he plays is so fun because he gets to forego the entire laning phase. What he does now is he maxes the Tempest E, he shoves the lane in, and he plays for insects on your mid laner. So this is a pick that is going to incentivize teams to roam a lot. It's going to incentivize a lot of high mechanical plays, and it's perfect for internationals.
And it does so much damage as well, like just inside the laning phase, if a jungler ever tries to get involved, like 2v2 is probably going to go your way when effectively you have 2 junglers, and junglers, let's face it, insanely high base damages. So early fights in the river, any of these sorts of plays are always going to be a good look.
One of the things I do think is important to call out is like when I saw Lee Sin in Armwood's hands, you want to see the combos, you want to see the entire kit being utilized. And that solo kill that was just on screen, it caught me off guard at how much burst damage there is, and also the range on that Tempest is larger than you might anticipate.
It's really big, and you also see with like the items combined there, it's not just the of damage he's able to do. It's how survivable you can be with a Gore Drinker plus a Sterix Gauge. Like, you don't go down easily. You have so much built-in sustain with your W, of course, that gives you so much ability to stay alive within the fights. And that's not even going down the rabbit hole of some other item builds, like the Eclipse, if you're versus very squishy teams, that I think can be very legit.
I mean, it depends, of course, on what the comp is, and also the versatility. You can engage, can disengage, can do absolutely everything. Next one, Rumble. This is a champion that has still got 100% presence. I believe it was 4-2 in the win rate. And yesterday we saw it used flawlessly at the end of the day by Talon.
Yeah, I think this is one of those champions that if you're not banning it on red side, you're making a mistake. If you're banning it on blue side, what are you thinking? It's so nasty. Just lock it in right off the bat, right? The buffs to give the percentage HP damage in the jungle, the attack speed when you go overheated, you just blitz through your camps. And then on top of that, when you think of some of the synergies you can do in your items, like, or in your runes rather, you can go for Ultimate Hunter. It's so free. His ultimate gets down to such an insanely
52 seconds we saw yesterday.
We had yesterday, yeah, and that's just crazy when it does so much damage. It's so long range, and it's the perfect champion, especially in a meta that's sort of devolved into, we fight around dragons early on, right? If you can get 2 early Drakes on your team, you force the team into you, you have the equalizer. It's very hard to beat.
Clement, what do you make of the Rumble?
I think Rumble is your go-to first ban. If you're not banning it, you better be picking it up, just like Ender has said. And I think overall, if you look at these 3 strong champions, they're sitting at around 74 win percent among the 3 of them. I think this is going to be a very blue side dominated meta once we go into the Rumble phases of the actual game, aptly named the Rumble phase, by the way. So you have 3 power picks that you can pick on blue side, and they're all flexible. I think whoever can actually play these 3 champions in the most positions is going to have a massive advantage in draft later on when we get into the BO5s.
Yeah, I think we even saw RNG in the LPL played in both top lane and mid lane, and this tournament already they've shown
it's
it
a tri-flex for them.
Yeah, so you can flex it all across the map, and even further than that, it's not even like you always have to flex it either, because these champions, the junglers, right? Like, how do you really counter that? We saw Nanasit go for the Nidalee. It didn't really do that much. Lee Sin, I mean, it's really hard to find champions just outright beat it in lane. Most matchups are going to be skill-based at best, so these champs so powerful.
So if you get Rumble in the jungle, you might just be able to send it for the win. With this being the first day of our second round robin, only teams from Group A will be competing, and those teams are, of course, Royal, Never Give Up, Unicorns of Love, and Pentanet.gg. RNG have had a perfect run so far at MSI. They've earned that impressive 4-0 record, as Clement mentioned just a little bit earlier, 98 minutes total game time. They are literally trying to speedrun MSI Groups. So the truth is now today, Unicorns of Love and Pentanet.gg will be the ones looking to beat one another. The record currently sits at 1-1. And one of the lanes that could be pivotal, Clement, you were talking, is going to be in the mid lane here.
It's going to be between Chaz and Nomans. Nomans is your typical hyper carry for the late game, but I think he's very constrained by how much damage he actually has to output. He is 31% of his team's damage, so he's always going to go for the sort of late game hyper carries like the Victor and the Kassadin. Well, I think Chaz has a chance to upset here because he is more free to go for some specialty picks. We already see him on the Lee Sin, adapting with the meta. He has that OPL specialty in the Ahri that we see RNG just ban out all the time, not really wanting to deal with it. And we checked his solo queue. He has some nasty stuff on his sleeve. This might be an underdog story for Pentanet.gg if they can get him out on the map early.
Yeah, and I'd specifically like to see him on some of those roaming champions, because when you look at the best that Pentanet themselves have looked in this tournament, I think it's when they're sort of getting Chaz and Pabu around the map and attacking together, because Pabu, when I watch his pathing, he is not a jungler that is focused on efficiency at all costs. I think he knows that his team is a bit of an underdog, so he's spending a lot of time neglecting his own jungle camps in order to find a big gank, find a big play, and it has been punished when teams have read it. But if he can get Chaz to work together, attack bot lane, look for dives, play around Praedyth as a duo, that could be very powerful.
So of course you see on our screen right now Unicorns of Love taking to the stage, and I actually am very happy to see smiles on the faces of the players backstage that were playing with the tennis ball just a little bit earlier. And the reason I say that, Unicorns look shell-shocked after their defeats over the last couple of days. And I think today, the mental matchup and the mental perspective is going to be incredibly important. Each team plays 4 games. UOL have the double right now. They go up against RNG and Pentanet, the double at the end of the day. Pentanet have the benefit of opening the day against Unicorns of Love. So what does that mean? If you assume that RNG destroy UOL, they have to come back from that. It is a difficult task for any player. Andrew.
Yeah, it for sure is. I also just feel like Pentanet come in with not a ton of expectations. Like, they go into the games against RNG, and it doesn't matter if they're getting blasted for 20 minutes and then their Nexus falls. They're laughing the entire time. They're having a good time. So I think that as far as like resilience mentally goes, like Pentanet really are just playing to like have a good time and show what they can do up against the Unicorns.
And I think it is important to address the fact that because the gap, the difference between RNG and the other 2 teams looks so huge and they're 4-0, there's been a lot of public discussion and criticism on how maybe Pentanet were, dancing and laughing, but you have to acknowledge the fact that the games that matter are against UOL. Clement, just before we move on and get to predictions, what do you think of the mental impact of playing 4 games that we've never had a group stage day like today in the past?
It's really rough for Unicorns of Love. I've said this before. I consider them the stronger team compared to Pentanet.gg, but I think they are going up against a lot of dire circumstances. It's not just about the mentality of being crushed by RNG before you play Pentanet.gg twice. It's also the fact that Pentanet.gg play RNG last. So if it comes down to a tiebreaker and RNG decides to have a fun game, that could actually just send the OPL representative, the LCL representatives forward through into the group.
Oh, I really like that call out, actually. A happy game, right? Is that what we're looking for? Okay, interesting, right? It also, when you see how the games played out yesterday, you cannot just automatically know the results. There's a heavy implication and bias, of course. So, what do you make of that?
So ultimately, I'm in a similar camp where I think Unicorns is the stronger team very clearly. But I would say that the way that the group plays out is you play each team in this group twice today. And there's a break. You at least have 1 game off before you have that rematch. So I think it's going to be really crucial who can adapt between games. Because already you've had to play the same team each and every day. Now you have to double it up. So that quick adaptation, that quick review, forget the RNG games. Like, these teams should not be stressing out about those. It is about coming in with the best possible plan in this matchup.
All right, so just before we move on and talk a little bit more in depth about RNG, Clement, who will advance to the Rumble stage between Pentanet and UOL?
This is kind of an outside stretch, but I actually want to go with Pentanet.gg. I feel like that the meta actually suits them a little bit better. They are more of a AD carry team with Pradith. We saw what his Samira could do. And just with the mental aspect, when you have a theme song like Hold On, We're Going Home, I actually feel that alleviates so much pressure on your shoulders.
Hold on, we're going home. It kind of is a tale of 2 stories. They're either going to hold on and make it a Rumble, or they just go home today. Whose funeral are you attending, by the way? Because one of these teams is being eliminated from MSI today.
I don't want to make anyone sad, Trevor. I don't want to do it. You're forcing me here.
And I'm going to make you do the opposite. What you need to tell me is who gets eliminated today, as you are dressed like a My Chemical Romance wannabe.
Wow. Pentanet, unfortunately. Koalas will be dropped.
Well, there we go. Koalas will be dropped. Having talked a bit about the need for Unicorns of Love and the dropped Koalas to win against one another, I want to now turn to Clement and say, okay, how do these teams theoretically, or maybe other teams at MSI, look to take down RNG?
Well, we do know about RNG's strengths. It's their early game focus on the top side and their late game hyper carry through Gala. But domestically, they actually have dropped 16 games in total, and there are some things that we can learn from those losses and those near misses. Number 1 is you have to fight Xiaohu and Wei in the top side. When RNG is losing, Xiaohu is on average behind 950 gold at 15 minutes. Now, this is a little bit easier said than done because the only 2 people that have been able to do it later on this split are Nuggery and Zoom. So if you don't have those 2, this might be a little bit difficult, but the key takeaway is do not expect to pick a weak side top laner blind and not give it any resources. RNG will feast on teams like this over and over again. That is a huge death sentence. Number 2, if there is a place where you want to attack in the mid game specifically, I would look to attack Crying in the mid lane. If you look at RNG gold graphs, they actually have a bit of a dip between the 16 to 20 minute mark. And that's because they don't naturally have mid jungle priority. They get that priority from the side lanes actually folding in. And this is what we saw top esports do against them. They focused down Crying right from the get-go, and they took the series to 5. It was a very close series where they could have won. They didn't really necessarily do it, but that's another pathway. Number 3, most importantly, is you have to recognize how RNG actually play out their team fights. They're not a standard front-to-back team. Xiao takes the least damage of any top laner in the LPL. What they do is they juggle aggro between their carries, and they try to make picks here and there. So the most common way that teams actually lose to RNG in late-game team fights is that they overextend for chases, and then they don't finish off the targets. If you don't finish off the targets and you allow RNG to just juggle between all these different carries, they are going to get massive amounts of damage out.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. You need to match Xiaohu in the top lane, make sure you don't pick a weak side top laner. You have to gank and pick off the mid lane. You also have to have team fighting where you deal with all 3 carries at the same time, and you cannot let them escape, otherwise you just lose. Is that about right? Is that all you have to do?
Yeah, I would say it sounds like a tall task, but factually that is what we have from their past experience. And for my third point, the point I want to emphasize is if you can only focus fire 1 carry, make sure it's Gala. Gala is the one that is gonna stick the dagger into your back and actually finish off the team fights. So out of the 3, Crying, Gala, and Xiao, make sure it's Gala in the late game.
That's assuming, of course, all of the stabs to the face and your side and these flanks haven't killed you already. Gala will just close it out, because that's what RG have been doing. Focus Gala. Make sure you finish the job. Apparently, that's what you have to do. We actually do have a look at his pentakill from the LPL finals as well. And let's
And this was a play I thought we'd see FPX go for sooner, where you'd actually instead keep Doomby bot side, but just group and use the fact you've got this massive range discrepancy. But RNG never really gave him the opportunity, never gave the TPs.
Solar Flare! It lands, and that's going to force Doomby into an early Zhonya's. The Shockwave is enough to only catch 1. The Olaf is dead. It's FPX turning this one around completely. But there's the Kaiser. There's 1. There's 2. Can Kaiser get any more? There's 3. Kaiser with the Kaiser. Gala! 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 He's doing it again! He's doing it again! Kill for Gala! Gala is a monster in this game!
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Yes, Gala got a pentakill in the LPL finals. Big whoop. Dagda and Penguin, you guys nailed the commentary. The first time you get to experience a pentakill like that in a series with that many stakes in front of thousands of fans, we could feel the energy that you're putting out. Congratulations to the cast. Congratulations to Gala and, of course, RNG. Now, before we think any more about the action on the Rift, there is some action on the streets today, because our Icelandic fun fact of the day, we have Dash in, that says Goku. That says Goku, right? You can read Goku?
That's not Goku, dude.
It says Goku.
Everyone, Dash here, coming from you on the ground in Iceland for today's Icelandic fact of the day. The streets of Iceland are governed by the world's oldest parliament, known as Althing, which was founded all the way back in the year 1930. Though the parliament was dissolved in 1800, it was restored later in 1845 and now helps shape the nation of Iceland into the place we know and love.
Oh, apparently it was go-to with a T and it meant street as Icelandic word. I really like the Icelandic facts of the day. Hopefully I get to say one myself during the course of the tournament. Our very first game is RNG versus Unicorns of Love, and the LCL champions made some very smart adaptations in the draft when they faced off just yesterday. I do think that their very first draft to start off MSI was abysmal, and a lot of discussion around whether or not they looked at the patch at all. But let's talk a little bit, Clement, on what you thought about some of the adaptations and maybe some of the priority picks as well.
Yeah, so the most important thing for Unicorns of Love is that they're coming in with the mentality that they have to break up Xiaohu and Wei through outdueling Wei with Inanasik. That is their go-to sort of strategy. That kind of explains the Trundle pick and the Nidalee that we saw later on. But as Ender has said, and in my opinion as well, is that you can't follow that up with the blind pick top laner and just leave it at that. I think that's a huge problem. And throughout all of these drafts, Unicorns of Love have that sort of trouble on the blue side where they are self-banning the Rumble. They haven't been shown as a team that actually adapts with the meta, and they're leaving that super power pick to actually be baggage on their own team on the blue side.
And the huge challenge with that, too, is you don't have a lot of time, right? You have the evening after you play a game to then practice and feel comfortable with it. So it's very likely we see them continue just to ban the Rumble, which is an improvement to leaving it open, but still not the best direction for Unicorns in a do-or-die day.
Now, let's talk a little bit about the shared champion pool and maybe how Anonysik and Wei may match up. You know, we've talked about the Rumble, we've talked about the priority, and just how Wei's looking more comfortable on the patch.
Yeah, exactly, because, I mean, you have things like Wei's just picked up all the champions you could possibly ask him to run with, and then you have Anonysik, who's run the Nidalee as a counter into the Rumble, which hasn't seen the amount of success that I think you'd want it to, and, well, you can compare Rumble and Nidalee, like, they can both clear the jungle, but one of them is a little bit better in the team fights. And then I also see this Trundle as an answer into the Olaf, which we saw up against Wei. But again, I don't think this is the right direction. These picks that Anonysik are going for can be good individually, but I don't think they're offering as much to the team as he needs to be able to offer.
Yeah, definitely the case. I mean, what do you think about this matchup here? What can Anonysik do to try to contain or control Wei, Clement?
So I think what we're going to see is the Rumble just be banned out consistently by Unicorns of Love, and I think there's going to be a huge fight on Udyr as the second pick. Even in the LPL, when Hecarim was dominant, RNG was a team that liked to go for the Udyr because they favor that level 3 skirmishing power and the ability to influence top lane. So I think that's kind of going to be the deciding factor between these two junglers, and see which one can actually duel each other out and keep them from influencing Xiaohu versus the top side in boss.
Now, Clement, I know we're expecting RNG to win this game here. I just want you to expand on one thought that you mentioned a little earlier, how RNG fold their side lanes into mid or into the other lanes. Ming in particular, somebody who's shown just such great competence in roaming and impacting the side lanes. What is Ming going to do today?
The greatest thing about Ming is that he is very willing to go roaming very early on. We've seen level 3 roams for him. We've seen level 4 roams for him. If you see RNG on a cheater recall, you always have to expect Ming to be in a different lane. And the second best thing is that they're actually willing to put him in a different lane for an extended amount of time. We have seen games where Ming actually just stays in the top side with Xiaohu, and RNG even have a saying, Ming is where the dual lane is. And this is a huge leg up because most teams do not really understand how to play when you have a support in the top lane for extended amounts of times, and you can show up and do a lot of crazy tempo plays that you're just not used to in your own region.
It's going to be very, very difficult for the Unicorns of Love to bounce back from this. We have 6 slated games for the day, and at the end of it, 1 will go home, 2 will advance to the Rumble stage. And we all know what's going to happen. We are all certain RNG are going to win. And a little bit of discussion around whether or not Unicorns or Pentanet will advance. But were you watching when TL and G2 made finals? Do you remember when CLG advanced to the MSI final? Were you watching yesterday when Dead Nation Focus Me came inches away from taking down the defending world champions? We may think we know what's happening. We may assume we know what will happen and take place. But frankly, grab yourselves a Red Bull. Clement, get yourselves sorted because MSI Knockout starts right now. What?
It does have wings.
2021. Unicorns of Love get a chance at revenge for that match they lost yesterday.
There's a lot of pressure on these guys. Nomad trying to make it happen.
You never want to be 12 kills down in a game like this.
Perfect roam from Ming. That is going to be the ace from RNG.
Losing to RNG is pretty rough. And Unicorns, they copped that twice.
I think our game against PGG, we are the better team and we are better players, so we should be the second place in our group.
Pentanet GG up against Unicorns of Love. Who's going to get that second slot in Group A?
We had a really rough start, but everyone back home is so supportive of us. We're going to make them proud.
我觉得 UOL 的话应该机会会更大一些。
Pentanet losing to RNG was expected, as RNG are not taking it easy on this group.
In our camp, we take our losses not too rough, and you could tell that Unicorns were definitely having a rough one, so it was time to strike while the iron was hot.
What a tough day of League of Legends for Unicorns of Love. Fantastic performance from Pabu. I mean, they saw blood in the water, they went for it.
Heard y'all were talking shit. What you gotta say now?
15 for 15 on the kills there. And this group just got a whole lot more interesting.
I actually don't know what to say.
Unicorns of Love are gonna go 0-2 on the day. Pentanet GG tied up 1-3.
We worked really hard this year, and we just should win. We have to win.
庆幸还是蛮足的。RNG is really tough, but if they make mistakes, we will win the game. This is just the start. Unicorns of Love, we're sending you back to Russia.
It's going to be a cold summer.